Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another recording of Hearthstone. Today is Wednesday, June 19th. We're starting late because, in part, I actually did play Doom 2016 for 1 hour. Determined not to let another day go by in which I really had nothing to say as far as holding myself accountable to actually getting any recording done. Unfortunately, getting back to Doom 2016 is not changing my feelings on this game. I guess we need to play Warlock to start focus on, and we need to do Tavern Brawl. By the way, I also took some extra time and have redone pretty much everything except for the Warrior, because the Warrior for some reason wasn't working on the Hearthstone replay website, and I'm not thinking I'm gonna spend the extra time to rename these things. So if it says custom something, that means it was built by Hearthstone itself, and if it has any kind of other name, then that means it was built with Hearthstone Remaster. I used up all my a significant amount of my dust. Let's see. Construct a duct using only cards from Whisper of the Old Gods, Mean Streets of Gadgetins, and Rastican's Rumble. Alright. So, we need to play Warlock. And then just easiest thing to do here would be to do this and just have Hearthstone build the deck for us. And then let's just start brawling. Yeah. So, yeah. It really doesn't feel great playing Doom 2016. It feels like you get put into narrow areas with very little in them, and then you'll go into slightly open world but still extremely empty open air areas, and you really could only call them open air areas because there's way too many sections and places where you can just fall off the ledge and die, which feels incredibly inappropriate for a Doom game. Doom 1, Doom 2, the original Doom 1 and 2, there's no place where you fall off a ledge and die. That's just not something that even exists in the game. There were a few places where you could fall in the pits of like acid and potentially die if you couldn't find the secret panel that would let you escape that, or if there was no secret panel. Yes, but in turning it 3D and really not having any polish on the game, level designs in particular, there are tons of places where just one wrong jump instant kills the Doomslayer, which feels really, really wrong. But once you get around those open air areas, you'll eventually get into an arena area where there's just a bunch of boring fights, and I can't really say much other than they are boring fights that feel like they are built around the idea of a rock paper scissors mechanic, something like that, where you will take damage, you will lose armor, and you'll need to do some thrill kills to get health back, but then you'll also run out of bullets, so you're gonna have to do some chainsaw kills to get bullets. And Doom Eternal is making that even more complicated when it comes out, because they're throwing in a flamethrower where you can get armor. So if you're like me and not really on board with the way this game plays, I don't think Doom Eternal has a lot of different gameplay to offer, and it really does feel like there's a different audience, and I'm just not the right audience for Doom 2016. Really does. It feels like it's more for people who played Quake and are used to rocket jumps and Oops, I played that backwards. I should have played that first, then this. But even if you were playing like Quake and doing rocket jumps, Quake Arena, I don't think that there's big open world empty void under you. It's like Minecraft. It's like a skyblock Minecraft level. It is what you keep running into, or I keep running into. I think I'm about halfway through Doom 2016, and it feels like, yeah, they built all the levels in the same way a skyblock map would be built in Minecraft, and you just can fall into the void. The map is still total garbage. It's this awkward 3D representation where you really can't see things, or you flatten it out to a 2D representation, and that doesn't help anything either, because then it's impossible to tell the levels that are directly below other levels. There's still a ton of collectibles and challenges and things that feel like game-like objects, but it really screams to me like id, as they are now owned by Bethesda, has somehow been infected with the Bethesda disease of not being able to make a actual game that's good gameplay. And I think you could say the same is true for a lot of, let's see, let's do this. Like Skyrim is revered as this great game, but in actuality it needed a lot of bug fixes that it never got directly from Bethesda, even in the definitive edition. It needs mods, and what you're really doing in Skyrim is you're getting missions to go into a cave, to kill a bunch of things, to grind out, to level up. You get some key at the end of that cave. Often it is a shout, thum, or something, or just a key, or just an item or something, and then you take that key or item, and maybe you don't take it back to the person who gave you the mission in the first place. Maybe you take it to some other person that then gives you another mission. But that's really the grind of Skyrim, and it's not that interesting of a grind, particularly when you're at the max level and you've got a archer build, which you pretty much have to play as, unless you just want to really try to play with a sword and shield or two-handed sword. Let's see. Why did I bother to do that? I'm just playing cards, I guess, more than anything. And the thing I would say Skyrim has that Doom 2016 doesn't have is Skyrim spent a lot of effort to write characters and storylines, and there's basically no characters or storylines in Doom. They really didn't intend to have a single player mode. That's kind of obvious. Like, this is their focus was Snap Map. Their focus was to make a multiplayer client in a multiplayer only game, which is what I think Quake Arena also was about. So in a lot of ways, Doom is an attempt to sneak Quake Arena into the hands of more people, since Quake Arena didn't really succeed. Alright, I guess we try that again. It didn't seem like there was anything too wrong with that deck. Of course, maybe everybody's gonna play Cthulhu, and the trick here is to just play Cthulhu.
Versus Lunara.
The forest fights back.
Your soul.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else really to say about Doom. Is just more and more, I have the feeling that as soon as I finish that main storyline, I'm gonna be done with it. I'm not gonna do any of the multiplayer. I don't even think you could have much of an experience doing the multiplayer now. I don't think there's any real audience that are still consistently playing Doom 1 or Doom 2016. So yeah, once I finish the story, which probably can't finish on any great cliffhanger since we know Doom Eternal is happening. And yeah, you're in a definite weird comparison point compared to like Doom 2016 compared to Doom 1, because Doom 2016 is probably telling more of a story than Doom 1 ever really did. The only real story you had in that was anything you built up in your mind based on the levels and the level designs and what was told to you at the end of the 3 episodes of Doom 1. Let's see. 1 damage shot minions. So I suppose I want to burn through that, and then I want to play Zombie U. I might want to play Alpha Protocol since it just lost its publishing licenses allegedly, and so Sega pulled it from Steam. I have that game, so this is another example of doing the right thing, even though it doesn't really seem like it's the smartest thing, in having a huge library of games on Steam that you may never get around to playing. It's the right thing for a YouTuber that wants to play video games, and particularly old video games. It's very possibly not the right thing for somebody who's a gamer and only wants to play the newest and the best, or games they have real nostalgia for. Let's see. Do we want to taunt this guy? Or kill this guy?
This might sting.
There we go. So that crisis is averted. How much of a crisis is it really that Alpha Protocol has been removed from Steam? Not much really. Alpha Protocol is a game I wouldn't even claim to have remembered existed before this announcement of it being taken off, and let's see. If I do this, it's gonna summon beasts from the hand. So the right move to do here is to kill this guy with one character. Yeah. So first thing we need to talk about is a YouTuber, Susan Wojcicki, who I can't really feel any sympathy for her, but I did see her in the conference with Vox, assumedly before the Vox adpocalypse, and the questions she was getting were from a bunch of raging SJWs in particular. So maybe that almost certainly is her life in a nutshell, is that she is constantly getting pressure from insane SJWs to push censorship further and further, but she's certainly not at the level in which I would claim she is nobly fighting against that sentiment. That doesn't really have anything to do with this announcement. She says, excited to partner with Universal Music Group to remaster some of the most iconic music videos of all time on YouTube. So these are they're basically going to be, I assume, allowed to upload a different video, a remastered video, in place of the music videos that are on YouTube, and while maintaining the likes and the views. Now the problem with partnering with this is Universal Music Group, and I can talk from personal experience here, is the #1 abuser of the YouTube Content ID copyright system. So here, if we look at some of the comments here, are you sure you're YouTube CEO instead of UMG CEO? List of clowns. Let's see. Here's the more the direct one. I would share this if only it wasn't for UMG abusing the copyright claim and strike system every chance they could. Hashtag save social blade. Siding with the enemy, I see. Are you kidding me? UMG is destroying the site. If only said company wasn't abusing copyright, ha ha ha. And I didn't even need to look at these comments to know that these comments were here. In fact, the comments have changed significantly. Ooh, I like this one here. This is a video game related one. Demonetization over Susan Wojcicki, Mario Clown. So it's more example of her not wanting to run the business that she is in. Clearly, she wants YouTube to be something completely different. The right response, frankly, for YouTube would be to kick out UMG completely, get rid of all the music videos. I know they have a lot of views and all, but that was what Google Music was supposed to be. And the Google Music has failed in part because so many people, including myself, have had a better experience going to Google search and searching a song and finding YouTube videos than finding Google Music results, which I don't know if you get any Google Music results when you search music. Probably not, if I was to guess. But yeah, as a YouTube content creator who's actually creating content specifically to be put on YouTube, and who isn't owned by a faceless music conglomerate, that's not only bad for YouTube, but is also bad for the music industry. All these music producers are certainly not really funding the development of new songs or paying residuals to people who created good songs. This is absolutely the wrong partnership to have. Is there anything I can do? Whenever your hero power kills a minion, which it wouldn't. Yeah, that's kind of a useless card, but whatever.
Behold the rage of the Firelands.
And there is another thing I've come to believe, and this is just a personal opinion. I feel like in the wake of the Vox adpocalypse, which I still don't think had too much to do with Vox, they intentionally have tried to start bribing people who are still in the YouTube Partner Program after kicking out so many people, that by effectively doubling the amount of ads on people's channels. And when I see ads now, it does seem like it is as many mid-roll ads as humanly possible. are getting placed. So it feels like a temporary bribe might be happening, and it is at the cost of viewers on YouTube, to the point where I think people are gonna stop wanting to watch YouTube as much for all the ads. It's been ridiculous for about a month now. So you can see I was at 355 dust. We can get back up to excuse me. We can get back up to almost 400 dust. And those cards aren't new. And my fear is that this temporary bribe may not be a permanent increase in revenue for people in the YouTube partner program that are making money. And couldn't the argument be made now that if they're kicking out so many people for having borderline content, which is just a way of saying we're gonna apply the rules randomly, if they're kicking out so many people from the YouTube partner program, doesn't that open the door for small-time video game streamers like me to be reconsidered, even though I don't have 1,000 subscribers and am likely never going to be allowed to get 1,000 subscribers on your channel because on this service, because of the way the recommendation engine and the entire YouTube system has designed itself around not suggesting people subscribe. Let's see. This. And I played a coin for no reason. I'm not playing right, clearly. The idea is to put magic carpet on the ground first and get rush. So this is to wait a few turns. These are all new decks with all new 0-0 win-loss ratios. So, how are we gonna do this?
Get in there and fight, maggot! Get in there and fight, maggot!
But see, is that a strategy? Did I just give him exactly what he wanted? I don't think so, because he would have had to clone that character. His hands are getting full very fast. So, yeah. YouTube still sucks. This is week 100 of YouTube still sucking, I guess. Alright. How are we gonna do this? I guess this is the best way to do that. Let's see. We are kind of back to news today. So, E3's effect is somewhat worn off now, at least in some part. Let's see. 211 microbots. Why did this not work? Oh, because this only works with 1-cost minions, and that's 2-cost minions. So there's a whole strategy you have to do with this that just doesn't make sense.
Free of that blasted tower!
So, I guess we're still trying to just get through the news and have shorter episodes. That seems like that is constantly how this is gonna go. These would be one cost minions. Job's done. So, moving on with news, TechRaptor has an article, Harry Potter Wizards Unite, releasing for Android and iOS this Friday. I've seen several commercials on YouTube for this. This is the Harry Potter or Pokemon Go equivalent. Remembering that the last Harry Potter game that came out was the one that was targeted towards kids and had lots of microtransactions and was just horrible. I don't really hold my breath that this will be much better, and arguably I have this thought that Warner Brothers still is bad for the video game industry and has been as far back as when they bought out Atari in the 80s or late 70s. And Warner Brothers owns Harry Potter. I think in all video game forms, the publisher is Portkey Games, the developer is Niantic, which is the same company that made Ingress, I believe. I don't think we'll see a bunch of people doing this stuff though. Alright. Wow. I was not expecting that to happen. Because that was a one-mana card that got a benefit there.
Give that minion a turn.
This is supposed to give rush to any one-cost minion, and it didn't work. Alright, well then, in that case, I guess we kind of have to... We have to kind of do this, and then do this. And that was the wrong way to play that anyways. First game we have to look at today is Witchsun Elurius Origins, which looks like a Sword and Shield style, Chivalry Mordhau style game. I imagine this is just the beginning of a lot of Mordhau clones. Maybe this is a good game, maybe this isn't. It's early access, discounted to $19.59 English only. I guess for these kind of games, as long as they have a single player element, and this is only single player, this is something worth following. Although, in a lot of ways, it's just kind of a Skyrim clone. If it's just a single player experience, it stops being a real competition. And this looks very much like a Skyrim clone in a lot of different ways. That being said, it's not like there is a new Elder Scrolls game that is worth playing coming out anytime soon. Alright, so that's Zoo Warlock. Let's see what Custom Warlock has to say. It does feel like there was a strategy in that deck, but certainly it's was a complicated strategy. It wasn't something basic enough that I could wrap my head around immediately.
Your soul shall be mine.
Gamma Sutra has an article here. Zynga-owned Empires and Puzzles has surpassed 34 million downloads. This is a weird number because that means that 34 million... I would suspect that doesn't mean that 34 million people have signed up and made individual unique accounts. I imagine you take 34 million and you subtract you divide that by a third and you get it down to 11 million downloads. But even in that case, 11 million, if I'm just gonna mess with the numbers, is an incredibly large amount of individual units sold. Now, I guess this is also the power of something that I assume is free compared to something that is a pay-for product. I wouldn't be surprised if Clash of Clans or Clash Royale has 50 million or 100 million downloads, just because people would have potentially had
What is my purpose?
Had multiple devices, so any mobile game might get installed to one phone and one iPad, or even a third phone over time. So I can see how these numbers get manipulated, and it kind of doesn't equate to anything. If you're not getting any money out of most of those people, if Empire and Puzzles, for instance, has no monetization whatsoever, there's no way that 34 million would equate to any income, where 100 million would or 1 million sales at $60 might be way more income than 34 million on a game that has very little microtransactions. So I am definitely in a position where I don't really know what the translation of that is. Let's see.
Who needs water?
And play this. Alright. So, going forward, I'll keep an eye out to try and learn how much a good mobile game's number of downloads would be. I'd imagine round numbers like 10 million means you've sold pretty well. I imagine even if you've got 1 million downloads, that means your game has done pretty well, even if it really hasn't made any money off of that.
Put this apple on your head.
Let's see. This.
I'll get right on it.
And let's go ahead and kill that. And then transfer that. That. And do that. And then return. Next game we have on Steam to consider is called Blood Brothers, which looks a little asset flippy and it's a little darker. By the way, Windows updated and I've changed the clear type settings just to see if maybe I could fix the problem of having trouble reading text on my smaller secondary screen. And frankly, at this point, I was starting to have trouble reading the text on my main monitor too. And I know I'm probably getting older and just losing my eyesight, for lack of a better explanation there. Let's see. I may not have any demons in my deck to draw, so this might be a useless spell. Yeah, this game, Blood Brothers, doesn't look that interesting. It's free, it's English only, it's got no reviews already. Yeah, this looks like something that might have been a Steam project or something, not something that's of a level of quality that it deserves to be on Steam. And I often wonder why people bother to put their games on Steam for free, but there's reasons I could definitely guess. Like, you could get some positive reviews at free and then start charging a price. I don't think there's anything that really stops you from doing that on Steam. I think you could raise your price if you wanted to. And then you would have all these positive reviews. Of course, most people are smart enough that they would start negatively reviewing the game or changing their reviews if they realize that it started charging. But Steam doesn't really do a great job of telling you that a game you already own has increased in price or gone quickly through charging. Blood Brothers is not making it to the wishlist though. Let's just be realistic here. What does this one do?
Back to the void.
There we go. Next story we have from Gamatsu, Puzzles in Dragon's Gold is coming to North America in late 2019. I think we already talked about this. We're still in kind of a pattern where I think we'll get some redundant bits of information, but I think eventually I'll get a handle on what I've seen and what I haven't. My brain is just about 5% still mush from its normal. I would assume it's usually 50% mush as far as what I've seen and what I haven't. Next game we have on Steam here is called Staden und Gamesladen, which seems like it's a I wouldn't call this a Skyrim clone as much as it is a strategy game of living in like a Swedish village or something. Seems like it's just kind of a low effort asset flip though. English is not supported, it's free to play, and it's only, yeah, and it's Swedish only. I don't think there's enough people, frankly, in Sweden to justify making a game that's Swedish only, or there's enough Swedish speaking characters in Sweden. So yeah, I don't think a game like this is well serving the rest of the world or the gaming community at all. Whereas if they had just translated it to English, then you're serving a significant amount of Europe and the Americas and the Asias, because English is by far the most spoken secondary language, if not primary language. I would venture to guess a significant amount of people in Sweden speak English, so the translation shouldn't have been that hard. There you go. So far, playing with the default built by Hearthstone deck resolved into victory, where playing with the Hearthstone replay deck did not. So let's stick with what we've got. Next article we have here is Gamasutra. Nintendo and Ubisoft honored at the 2019 Games for Change Awards. This, I think, the Games for Change Awards might very well be owned by the same parent company as Gamasutra. Seems like that's how this all works, since I know GDC is run by Gamasutra's parent company too. The Game of Change Awards winners were Game of the Year went to Nintendo Laba, Most Innovative went to something called Tindar, Best Gameplay went to something called Chris, Most significant impact is UNICEF Kid Power. A lot of these I don't recognize. Best learning game was Assassin's Creed Discovery Tour, which is a poor statement on educational games. Best student game was Prism. I don't think I can recognize that. Best XR, I guess XR means AR or VR experience, went to Homestay. People's Choice Award went to Assassin's Creed Discovery Award. Industry Leadership Award went to Ubisoft, which I don't know why Ubisoft deserves that credit at all. I'd really like to hear justification for some of this. And then the Vanguard Award went to Lindsay Grace, who, again, don't know who she is, so like, that's weird. I kind of assume Games for Change is mostly focused on some of the identity politics, pushing social impact, social justice stuff. Some of which I would agree with, some of which I wouldn't. I think in a bigger nutshell, video games don't have any duty or any ability to make any real change. The one thing they all do is they, through E3 actually, they fund the Entertainment Software Alliance, the ESA, and then the ESA lobbies the US government and maybe some other governments to stop censorship, and maybe they lobby for some other stuff too. Ideally, you would hope that the ESA has some branch off movements where it's like trying to help more impoverished kids have access to computers and play video games, but we really don't see stories like that. It would be so easy for video game companies to say, hey, in Detroit we gave game consoles to 100 kids. Nintendo could easily be giving Switches out to hundreds or thousands of kids. Entire graduating classes from elementary could be getting Switches at random, and that would certainly help the impoverished communities where kids are often playing on the streets and or joining in gang violence because they just have nothing better to do with their time. I mean, there's certainly a lot of other reasons, but boredom is at the root of a lot of social unrest, and you don't really see that. So you still have to be moderately rich, or at least at the upper end of impoverished, to have a video game console in some areas of the United States, and certainly around the world, you know. So that you could do a lot more impact that way. You could donate to soup kitchens, you could donate to housing projects. There could be a lot of change that you could try to implement that nobody would disagree with, instead of mostly video games companies try to go for the SJW topics that are more controversial and get brownie points with the video game critics or video game journalists, mainstream video game journalists who are all SJWs. But that's also putting my own spin on this, and I'm not 100% sure of anything, because this article in part is not telling me really anything about what Games for Change was, what their goal was, what they were trying to accomplish, anything along that line.
I comply.
But I can say from my perspective, a lot of the things that were awards I do not recognize at all. I've never heard of them. And things that I do recognize that got awards, I don't understand why. The Nintendo Labo in particular is a great example of that. Like, Nintendo Labo is cardboard that requires a $250 plus Nintendo Switch to work, and the cardboard packs, I believe, range from $60 to $80, maybe even $100. That is definitely not doing anything other than making bank on all of on cardboard garbage, really, and it's really not making any kind of social impact or helpfulness to an impoverished, poorer kids, or under educated kids, which would be poorer kids in a lot of cases. I don't think Nintendo Labo is particularly educational, as much as they would like to say it is. So, like, it doesn't really seem like a realistically helpful thing. It's really a rich kid's toy, and if your kids are rich, the parents of those kids are rich, which means if the parents choose to, they will get better education opportunities, better lifestyle choices in general. Yeah, I don't really have a way of seeing that other than a socio-economic way. So again, if Nintendo Labo was supposed to win a Games for Change award, they better have given out thousands upon thousands of Labo kits and Switches to go with them. And I don't recall hearing a story about this. I've been covering video game news for at least a year straight now. So doesn't seem like that award show is doing too much. And the ESA should do more in general. I think the ESA in particular has some problems, and it's going to have some major problems unless their the new CEO can solve those problems. Which the hope is that they can, who will and can. Because if the E3, which wasn't as good this year, turns out to be as bad for several years in a row, which it probably won't because of the new consoles coming out next year. If E3 doesn't go well, then people like Microsoft aren't going to pay $5 million, which is what I think I heard it costs to get a booth at E3, and then that $5 million is going straight to the ESA's budget to lobby. If anything, what I would say is their money-making opportunities seem to be all backwards. The ESRB, I believe, is part of the ESA, or a spin-off subgroup of the ESA. So every time a game gets rated, there should be a license, if not a full-on percentage point, taken from that. That's how I would want to see it work. That way, as people put out more games that they try to sell, ESRB and ESA gets more money. But maybe that system was just something nobody would ever agree to, and they just stop using the ESRB ratings. So yeah. There's some weirdness, certainly. There's also a lot of room where charities could merge together with the ESA pretty easily. If the charities that make video games stations for kids in hospitals was a subsidiary of the ESA and directly funded through that, then you could kind of get the best of both worlds that way. And reduce the number of board members that are paying themselves executive bonuses in a charity, which often happens, or it seems like it to me. It often happens where charities are spending at least 50% of all their income paying the boards like 7-figure salaries. But we're here to talk about video games, not corruption in the charity world. So again, we have a victory for the Warlock. So where are we here now? We need 1 Druid or Rogue victory. This was left over, so let's try Token Druid, the Hearthstone replay, hsreplay.net deck, and then we'll try the other Druid deck if we don't win. Next we have an article from Gamatsu. Disaster Report 4+ Summer Memories for the Switch, launch of September 26th in Japan. I know the Disaster Report series is never coming outside of Japan. They've said specifically they don't want to do that. That being said, I guess I'm just kind of mentioning it for people who would import it from Japan. That's, I guess, the reason to mention Japanese games and when they have Japanese only release dates, just because it's not getting a English translation or a Western release doesn't mean that there aren't at least a small number of people that would still import the game. I really wish the Disaster Report series would come out of Japan. It would probably be very, very a good seller. And they probably don't have to do a ridiculous amount of changing of localization. It's probably just translated pretty well. So we already talked about this, but Gamma Sutra's article, Alpha Protocol delisted from Steam due to publisher rights expiring, which I guess means that some other publisher could publish it. Obsidian's Alpha Protocol is now available for sale. I have it, but it's kind of weird now to try and play it, because if I did cover it, I don't have anywhere where people could actually buy it. This came over 9 years after it came out for the PC, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3. It's probably not an indication of a beginning of a trend. I imagine most games on Steam sell well enough that there's a decent reason to renegotiate the publishing rights. I don't know if Obsidian is still around, so this is where it gets a little bit more confusing. Let's see. So I'm looking at the Wikipedia page. Here, alright. Obsidian's Alpha Protocol came out originally in 2010, so 9 years old. Obsidian Entertainment is owned by Xbox Game Studio right now, so Microsoft clearly owns this. So this is an example of either possibly a remaster or just a re-release of the same thing. There really is no reason to believe that it's not coming back to Steam. Let's see. Excuse me. Yeah, looking at Obsidian's list, they have like Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, Neverwinter Nights 2, Alpha Protocol, Fallout New Vegas. So Fallout New Vegas potentially was published by Bethesda. I wouldn't be surprised if that left. Dungeon Siege 3, South Park: The Stick of Truth, Pillars of Eternity. South Park was published by Ubisoft. It seems like Obsidian dealt with a lot of different publishers. Pillars of Eternity, Skyforge, Pathfinder Adventures, Tyranny, Pillars of Eternity 2, Dreadfire, and The Outer Worlds, which is an Epic Store exclusive, I believe. So, maybe Alpha Protocol becomes an Epic Store exclusive, too. But I suspect not, if Microsoft has anything to say about it, because then it would very much look like this would be a backing away from their previous commitments to try to have games everywhere. Just gonna end the turn there. So I would say one of two things are going to happen with Alpha Protocol, and since I already own it, it doesn't really matter to me other than just as a video game news reporter of sorts. Either Microsoft's going to republish it very quickly, or it's somehow going to become an Epic Store exclusive. Let's see. Next story we have here from TechRaptor. Bernie Sanders and Take-Two take opposing views on video game developer unionization. Bernie Sanders, I believe, did an AMA and they asked him about Game Workers Unite and such. The quote here is, "The game industry made $43 billion in revenue last year," stated Sanders. "The workers responsible for that profit deserve to collectively bargain as part of a union," end quote. So that's a kind of blanket Bernie Sanders opinion, not something that is in any way surprising. I don't think Bernie Sanders in any way has any kind of nuance or special understanding of how Game Workers Unite is not really, from my perspective, and this is my personal opinion, actually trying to go about to create a proper union, and instead is trying to negotiate like their union without doing the paperwork. Even in one of the late night Giant Bomb interviews where they had the main woman from Game Workers Unite, main person from Game Workers Unite, she described the union as whenever two employees work together to negotiate to fix some of the problems that they've noticed in the industry or something along that line. I don't think anybody would really agree that two people could go and form a union at any job and that seriously be considered a union. First of all, if you had two people, you would always be at 50% ties in every single vote. Second of all, if you have only two employees, I think that would be ridiculous to try and allow a union to form with only two employees. Let's see. There's another quote here from Zelnick. which I believe Zelnick is the Take-Two guy, and his quote here is, "Unions tends to develop when labor relations are not typically non-existent." End quote. That is inaccurate. I would say the more accurate way to describe that, unions tend to develop when labor relations are typically bad, not non-existent. And typically unions have been most beneficial when they were more workers than there were jobs. I don't think that really has anything to do with a union at all. That's a red herring. And when the jobs were low-paying jobs, that's a red herring. That's not true. We have fewer workers than we have jobs, and they're high-paying jobs. That's a red herring. That's not true. So, yeah, Take-Two doesn't want a union. Surprise, surprise. Any bit of management anywhere would not want a union. That's totally the case. The video game industry in particular would, in my opinion, very much benefit from having a real union, so that they could create job pools in particular for game testers, so that when you are no longer needed to be a video game tester at one company, you are on the top of the list to be hired at a different company as a video game tester, so you have more consistent employment with more consistent income. The amount of crunch is a major factor to the job security issue at every level of being an associate employee as a video game developer is an issue. The fact that you could be a senior programmer and get fired without cause, the fact that you can be a mid-tier or lower programmer and get fired without cause just because is ridiculous. The management in general is getting crazier and bigger and more powerful in video game companies. Randy Pitchford, unfortunately have to mention him again, is kind of a great example of that. In new legal filings that we'll talk about later, he's apparently 51% owner of Gearbox, and he was capable of negotiating a contract for himself for $12 million bonus that he then paid into a separate business fund, which he had negotiated for that to happen when there really was no reason for that to happen at all. In the negotiation, he could have just as easily said, I'm going to pay myself a $12 million bonus, and it's going to go into Gearbox and then directly out of Gearbox into my personal account. Laundering it, for lack of a better term, which I think that's basically what he was trying to do and probably failed in. Laundering that money through a separate business fund just caused the attention to arise on that transaction when really shouldn't have. But it still looks incredibly fishy when you know that Randy Pitchford is getting a $12 million bonus. Everybody else at Gearbox is supposed to get royalties from a bonus pool, and it sure feels like that $12 million bonus could have, had he negotiated it in a better good faith way, gone to the bonus fund to pay the other employees at Gearbox, the lower employees. And that again would be an example of where the union could negotiate. They wouldn't really negotiate how much of a bonus any of the management gets, but they can negotiate and say, we've got a grievance. It feels like you could have given everybody a bonus here, and you chose not to. And sometimes a grievance is just what it exactly feels like and nothing more. And hurt feelings are something that a union could negotiate around. Because that hurts company morale, and you could easily argue company morale at any video game development company is probably is not really that great. But as far so you kind of get two comments here on this TechRaptor article. You get Bernie Sanders, who believes in a slightly socialist idea, but he's not really a socialist at all, and his ideas are not really socialist at all. He still very much believes in capitalism. He's just believing in a capitalist society that has social safety nets like Medicare and Medicaid, and wants to expand those social safety nets to help more people who have not been helped by the current almost pure capitalist system that the United States has. There's a big difference. If Bernie Sanders was truly a socialist, he would be trying to nationalize the banks, for instance. We've got to watch and learn here. Let's see if we can get this done. He would be trying to take direct control over companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon.com. A true socialist would say, we're going to just take control of Amazon.com, and we're going to deliver all your item needs through Amazon.com alone, and everybody would be given like a ration of food and clothing budget to that they could either purchase or they were assigned foods. If you were really a socialist in the United States, you'd take over the farms, industrialized farming and small farms. You would have that all run by the government instead of subsidizing farming over and over again. You take over oil companies, you take over airplane companies. You would have the government run entire industries that most people would agree would be at the very least a challenge for the government, the United States government, to run. There's no doubt that no real political candidate or person in general would actually be a socialist and actually be in Congress or the Senate like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders wrote his book and made a lot of money on that. That's not really something a socialist does. So yeah, there's definitely some slander there, and I wouldn't get too much into whether socialism or capitalism or communism is good or bad. They're all economic systems. They all work fine. The problem is corruption, and you have to look realistically at how corrupt is your government. In my case, how corrupt is the United States government? It's moderately corrupt. So if we were to go with a communist or socialist economic system, there would be probably the same, if not more, corruption as there is in a capitalist system.
That was an error.
So it really comes down to just how do you want resources spread in a society. Do you think the government should be in charge of resources, or do you think corporations should be in charge of resources? And if you believe corporations should be in charge of resources, then you have things like Nestle, like poisoning water and selling bottled water and poisoning the environment, or people causing earthquakes because they're fracking for oils and things like that. But that really is getting off topic, so let's move on.
Astonishing.
Next game we have to consider in Steam is 123 Bruegel. I assume this is like Bruegel. It would be how it's pronounced. This looks like kind of a cardboard VR game with little kids. I mean, what are you doing here? Are you making a little cardboard? Is this like a hidden game? Hidden object game? Or is this some kind of toy that people play with? I wouldn't be surprised if there is a toy that is very much like this. So it requires VR, it's free to play. I'm gonna put this on the follow list. It's English, French, and German. Yeah, this feels like this is some kind of European cardboard cutout toy, little playset thing. If you have VR, it should probably give you 15 minutes of entertainment, and then that's probably it. I don't think that there's much more to it. That being said, I guess it is nice to see, now that we are done with E3, we're not just getting total garbage asset flip content. Here's an interesting question for YouTube video producers. I have the blur going on here. Does the blur potentially drastically increase the size of a 3-hour video of Hearthstone? Because here's the thought. The way video compression works, if this pixel here never really changes for several frames, then there's some temporal compression that can be done. I'm not sure if MKVs do any kind of temporal compression though, or MP4s. I think it's MP4, MPEG-4 that's. So if there's no temporal compression, the only compression that would really happen is if this image is, if this pixel's blue and this pixel's blue and this pixel's blue and this pixel's blue and it's all the same blue, you can compress it that way like you would a zip file. But then the question is my blur changing the color of the pixels or the locations of the pixels in a consistent way, or is it doing it differently all the time? Because if it's doing it consistently, that means an anti-blurring algorithm could probably unblur everything pretty easily, quite frankly. But maybe not, because there's not a lot of movement happening in the background to give them any information. Or if the blur function that I'm using is actually changing the way it blurs every frame and doing different random blurring things, then an unblurring algorithm probably couldn't as easily, depending on how random the algorithm is, unblur something. Of course, if I was trying to do something like super illegal, something like Anonymous, the hacker group, and try and blur things, I probably wouldn't just be using a built-in plugin that's open source to blur things. I think there would be a lot more you would try to do if you're working for the CIA. So any concern about something being able to be unblurred is not really a concern to me. And quite frankly, in the bigger picture, if I was playing an adult game and I blurred it on YouTube, and then somebody figured out how to download that YouTube video and unblur it, that's not really a problem for me, because I didn't want to blur it on YouTube in the first place for that reason. My question is, is this significantly increasing the size of the videos? And I guess I can test that easily once I can't do it while I'm streaming, but all I really need to do is go back to the old videos that had the black instead of the blur. And I still don't know if the blur is a good idea. And look at the size compared to the runtime of those videos and see if there's a apples to apples comparison, well, a close to apples comparison. It wouldn't be the exact same video, but if one's 3 hours and it's 5 gigabytes and one's 3 hours and it's 15 gigabytes, then the blur function is a failure. It's making a big problem. But I don't know if that's the case or not. All I know is that last night I did a 1 hour recording of Doom and it was 5 gigabytes, and I did it's next to a 2 hour stream of Hearthstone, which was 5 gigabytes, and that doesn't seem right because Hearthstone shouldn't take that much space because most of the screen is consistent from frame to frame. You have a ton of empty space here that really doesn't change, a ton of empty space here that doesn't really change, a ton of empty space here that doesn't change, and then little bits of animations here and here. So these are the kind of technical things I think about as I'm making content. Moving on, next game we have to consider is a game called The Isle of the Dead, which, looking at how much water and sky is in this screenshot, makes me feel like it's probably a low effort asset flip game. There's this house that disappears apparently in the video and becomes this water thing. It feels like one of those surreal games that you would call surreal because it's like nothing. Yeah, this feels like a low effort asset game to me. Requires VR, it's free to play, so again, I guess the price is right. English, French, and German. I wonder if this is from the same developer. Let's see, RT France, latest products France. Let's see, come back over here. Yeah, RT France. So this publisher, RT France, or Arte France, is apparently putting out some VR games at the same time, free to play. So I don't know what that really means, other than possibly that they've given up, or that they've decided they needed to be on Steam but couldn't charge any price for it. But I think I'll put all these on the fall list. They'll stay on the fall list unless I actually get a VR headset. Next game we have to consider here is The Scream. So now, from what I've heard, the story of The Scream, this picture, this painting, is actually misunderstood, and it's not the character in the painting that's screaming. It's actually the character in the painting is a self-portrait of the artist who had schizophrenia and heard a scream that was more than likely not there, and that's why he's grabbing his own ears. In this case, it seems like they've taken that one picture, which that doesn't even look like the actual picture. It looks like somebody redrew it, and they're doing a surreal, for lack of a better experience here. This is an interesting experience, certainly. I feel like this must have been in a museum, these VR headsets. Again, free, So if you have VR, it's English, French, and German. It's from Arte France. I'll put it on the follow list. And next game we have to consider is Claude Monet, The Water Lily Obsession from Arte France. So these had to have been in a museum, or at least designed to be in a museum. You wouldn't do this. I also wouldn't be surprised if these were funded by the government of France. They gave out like a patronage of some sort. That's not the right word, but the government gave out grants to make these art projects in the agreement that they be released to the public for free at some point. So these could have been things made a couple years ago. From what I've heard, their VR was a complete and total failure at E3 this year. This again, free to play, English, French, and German. This looks like a rather pretty experience too, compared to the Scream, which is more of a scary, surreal experience. So again, this will go on the follow list. And I started to say something and then I lost my track.
Warriors of the frozen wastes. Right choose.
Oh yeah, I was talking about yeah, VR at E3, from what I've heard, was completely non-existent. There was very, very little coverage on it. It, to me, feels like that this is an accurate depiction of where VR is. I don't think we're going to see too many more games get released on VR over the next few years. And I think VR is going to fall into just a deeper and deeper hole of being not considered or not relevant. Yeah, I think VR is beginning its death now. There's been no mention of VR support whatsoever for PlayStation 5 or the Microsoft Scarlet console, whatever its real name will be. And I severely doubt it will have much VR support. They could both easily just say, yes, you could plug in a Rift or a Vive into our console, but I bet there's going to be zero software support or interest in that. Are we still playing the same game, or did they start another game while I was not paying attention? I think we're playing the same game. It's been going for a while here. Yeah, we have to be still playing the same game because he's at 10 mana crystals. I'm just trying to get a watch and learn to actually win. You could do that easily. Guess he's saving this for later.
Job's done.
Next game we have to consider is called Faith of Fate, which sounds like a ridiculous alliteration of a name, and it doesn't really look like much of a game. Looks like a simplistic, very possibly one-screen top-down shooter.
What now?
With what I would classify as close to MS Paint level pixel graphics. Early access for $4.19. English and Spanish. There's absolutely nothing interesting here at all, so that clearly is not going to the follow list. Tech Raptor has an article. Sakuna of Rice and Ruin puts a twist on farming. I'm still iffy on this RPG game. I don't know how much of this is actually the rice farming and how much of this is actually the RPG farming, the RPG fighting and grinding, and platforming apparently too. Let's see. It's kind of a beat 'em up game, I guess. So clearly I don't even know what this game is, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. When you look at this, the idea that there's a rice farming element to this is weird. You would think it would just be a standard beat 'em up, 2.5D platformer. But let's see. You defeat this boss, and are these rice seeds you're collecting as a currency?
Astounding. I'm almost out of cards.
Like, is this all the game actually consists of? Or do you actually do some farming?
Well played. Checkmate. Well done.
So I'm still in a weird position with Sakuna of Rice and Ruin as far as how successful it is. I don't see a reason to follow that guy. That watch and learn failed. Let's play some Shaman titles and then move on to the next account. Probably should break up the recordings too. Yeah, I really don't have any excuse to not break up the recordings. But still don't think I'm gonna do it. Maybe after this game I will. Like, we'll play one game and then we'll break it up.
Roll versus Gul'dan.
Gamma Sutra has an article. A former Magic Leap employee is accused of stealing tech to launch his own augmented reality game glasses. This sounds very similar to a lawsuit that already happened, where the guy from Oculus 5, Oculus Rift, was accused of stealing technology to go work for some other company that made the HTC Vive, I believe, or vice versa, or something like that. Let's see. The company alleges that Zhu used his 13-month-long employment at the company to acquire information on proprietary tech from Magic Leap, and then quickly developed a prototype of lightweight, ergonomic design mixed reality glasses that uses a smartphone and other devices. Blah 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 blah. I think what you take from this is, yeah, former Magic Leap employee is accused of stealing technology. It's kind of 50-50 here. I think part of the problem is augmented reality and VR is not as complicated as it might seem, and really doesn't deserve the amount of claims of proprietary technology and knowledge. There's probably only a few ways to do it. The lenses have to be a certain shape and sizes. The ideas and concepts have to be somewhat similar. These are generic, basic ideas that I imagine somebody who hadn't worked for 13 months, which is not a long time, frankly, could have easily come up with. That being said, if I worked for a company for 13 months and then I'm no longer working for that company, it's probably because I was either fired or was not having a good experience there. So it makes a lot of sense to say, hey, in that 13 months I gained skills and I should be able to use those skills to make my own wages and pay myself and feed myself. This is the problem inherently with any non-compete clauses, how they're morally wrong and unethical. Is the trade-off is is and has always been that you hire an employee and as a show of good faith and as a reminder that you can't just throw away employees like trash. You have to tell them inside corporate secrets and hope that they don't go and make a new company instead, because they won't bother to make a new company or a competition as long as you treat them well. Like the idea of employees having the methods and operations in which a business is run is supposed to be a thing that scares managers away from firing people or getting rid of people one way or another. And that has been very much marginalized as a balancing element when it really shouldn't be. Let's see.
Elements guide me.
So yeah, the courts will settle that if it actually goes to courts, but I doubt it will. On the other hand, it is seemingly a growing case of Chinese, in particular, employees coming from China on work visas or coming from China in some other way and working for a company specifically just to steal those ideas and go back to China and make their own companies, which I assume Zhu is Chinese. I'm apologizing if I'm wrong there. And it certainly has been the case that companies have stolen, entire countries have stolen ideas from other countries, and it's somewhat of a problem, somewhat not. It's not as big of a problem as I think most companies would make it out to be, and it might be argued that it's actually a better thing because it helps society grow in a quick and efficient way.
Elements guide me.
I played that wrong. Moving on to the next legal story, where court documents are coming fast and furious here a week after E3. TechRaptor has an article. Court documents show Gearbox CEO Randy Pitchford diverted funds to personal company. Now, see, the problem here is he's the CEO. He negotiated the contract. 2K agreed to divert these funds. If there was a board, they would not have allowed this negotiation to happen this way. To have a interested party negotiate his own bonus is unethical in the corporate world, and it is saying quite a lot to say anything is unethical in the corporate world. But I don't think that there's too much of a gotcha here or too much illegal here unless the judge, and I guess this is in a Texas court, so the Texas judge might take things a little bit more plain and simply and on the face of it, and he may just say, actually no, this just smells fishy, and so I'm going to rule in some favor, although the lawsuit really doesn't have anything too much to do with this $12 million of funds. Well, at least one of the lawsuits doesn't. It's really more still just mudslinging, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
Elements guide me.
I played that wrong. But the one thing this does prove, I think, is because this information has been handed over by Gearbox, and thus basically Randy Pitchford handed over this information, or 2K handed over this information. This $12 million bonus payment was pretty much denied to exist. So it's not like they originally said to the public, yes, that happened. It's that Gearbox and maybe 2K denied that it happened, and is now coming out in the court date documents and saying actually yes, it did happen. So there's a lack of honesty that a judge certainly would not appreciate in this case. Let's see. Let's see. Calendar has accused Pitchford of, quote, violating his legal duties toward Gearbox, including accusations of embezzlement, after Pitchford sued Calendar for misuse of the company credit card for personal expenses, including the destruction of evidence, and that's putting it kindly.
Prove your worth.
This is still very much a story that is going on,
Magic shall not.
but it is also a story that doesn't need to be going on, frankly. This would have been best suited to not have happened until after Borderlands 3 had come out for several months. There was really no chance that this stuff was going to clear through the court systems before Borderlands 3 had come out. So, yeah, it's just not a good...
Job's done.
I could have won there, I think. Just not a good way to be a CEO. Like, you should have probably let Calendar get away with whatever he had gotten away with. The statute of limitations on most crimes are at least a year to file, so you could have gotten at least a good 6 months after the launch date of Borderlands 3. So none of this happened during Borderlands 3, and maybe some of this is specifically timed to come out during Borderlands 3. Like Troy Baker, Randy Pitchford saying Troy Baker said he didn't want to come back as a voice actor. That's something that he started, and Troy Baker wouldn't have come back and say, no, you didn't even ask us, had Randy Pitchford not shot off his own mouth. Or same as bad-mouthing the Claptrap voice actor, from which I hear the Borderlands 2 DLC, the free DLC Borderlands 2 got, has the new voice actor for Claptrap, and they have a mission in there in which you're trying to, for Claptrap, steal a bunch of cryptocurrency, and the mission fails, and at the end the Claptrap says something along the lines of, well, I'm broke now, I have to go back to my former employee and beg for my old job back. Which seems like a direct, insulting, enticing thing to do, to integrate into free DLC and insult. It doesn't feel like the writer of that mission did not know what was going on, or would have been able to sneak that into the free DLC. I don't know if the voice actor for Claptrap ever did try to do any kind of cryptocurrency thing. All I know is that he went to work for Rooster Teeth. Now Rooster Teeth has its own problems with a ton of Glassdoor reviews saying it's terrible. Rooster Teeth, not so much video game news, though, because the only thing they really have is Ruby, and there's a Ruby video game that's not really worth playing, so I think I took it off the follow list. And I don't think there's a Gunlock video game. So yeah, Rooster Teeth very possibly not a great, not a great place to work, as I imagine any kind of animation studio, for lack of a better descriptor, is probably not a great place to work. Rooster Teeth still could easily be better than 90% of all the Japanese animation studios where people are worked to death. But yeah, and instead of talking about the Penn and Teller VR experience, which is, I believe, called Penn and Teller Frankly Unfair, Unkind, and two other words starting with the letter U, so it's F-U, U, U, and U is the subtitle of it, which seems to be just a collection of VR games that are designed to be integrated as kind of magic tricks to make fun of your friends and lose your friends effectively with this VR game. I imagine what this really is they're putting the Penn and Teller name on a collection of VR experimental programs when Gearbox was experimenting with VR, which one would hope and assume they are not experimenting with VR too much now. They had the Borderlands VR element happen, and that was alright, but nobody really wanted to play it, and I think that they learned their lesson as much as anybody else, that VR's just not going to be the next big deal. But yeah, that's, I think, out right now for I don't know what, but instead of talking about that, we're talking about a lawsuit that is poorly timed, to say the least. You could have easily not sued your ex-lawyer, even if he had stolen some money, until after the release of your game. Maybe he was running out of time, but if the statute of limitations to file is a year, or let's say it's even 6 months, having all of this go through the court system right now is bad. It's bad coverage. Meanwhile, I still think Borderlands 3 will be a fine game when people get it out of Epic Store exclusivity and actually start playing it. Hopefully, maybe people will be tired of the game by that point, and the only people that will have a good experience are the people that got it in the Epic Store exclusivity.
It's not a valid target.
Alright, what do we want to do here?
Gotcha!
Just gonna end the challenge. Moving on, CheckRaptor has an article. Darksiders Genesis may be the ideal Darksiders experience. If that's the case, then I guess Darksiders as a series has been kind of a failure, and maybe they should just reboot the story and have more Darksiders Genesis games. And this looks like this is just a TechRaptor, actual video from TechRaptor interviewing the people. There's a lot of TechRaptor articles that have May in the name. I don't think I can be sold on Darksiders Genesis the way it is now. Had Darksiders Genesis been the first game in the series, and then they moved to a 3D adventure platformer like Darksiders 1, maybe then I could understand some of that, but yeah, I played this wrong. Regardless of how I played this, I've still played it wrong.
Thunderstruck!
Let's see. more bouncing around topics, whereas if I had really curated this news, I would have changed it better. Borderlands 3 put out a cosplay guide of all the characters. They are pretty heavily encouraging people to cosplay. Here we have a female Psycho, which they're heavily telling you, yes, as a female Psycho, you have to actually have a shirt on, because the male Psycho wouldn't have a shirt on. I don't know if cosplayers really need guides, frankly. At that point it makes it feel like cosplayers are so dumb that they can't even do their own unique thing. Meanwhile, the male Psycho, perfectly fine shirtless. I wonder if there's going to be any instance here of a shirt at all worn. No. So all the guys have to be shirtless, all the girls have to wear a shirt in the cosplay guide. It's like, okay, that's a little unfair, sexist, but also 100% in line with what I imagine would be the rules of any convention. Alright, let's just play around with here.
Thunderstruck! Well fought. I concede.
Not gonna go through all of those, but this new character Troy, again, shirtless with a coat over him, or shirtless with a robotic arm. I didn't know he had a robotic arm even. This really is just character art more than anything. It's just a easier collection of character art before the game came out. And let's see, are we done here? Yeah, I'm pretty much gonna have to do the watch and learn. We'll try this again. Try another watch and learn while this is going on. Are you gonna work? Alright. Interesting. Never seen that error message before. Alright, well then I'll do watch and learn later. Let's move over to the Asian account. So this is the other main bad guy, Tyrion, and she's fully clothed in everything but her arms. I don't think we're at the point where we could really call Borderlands 3 getting to the point where they're covering up all the female characters or anything like that, but I think the Psycho characters in particular have become slightly more problematic. Here we have the new Siren showing midriff, but has a jacket and a kind of high cut, well, not that high cut cleavage, but certainly not anything as scantily clad as Mad Moxie. And I think we will just go through all of these outfits just so we can get an idea of where the costuming is going. It does seem like here's FL4K being completely covered up. Apparently has a robotic leg. Or the entirety of him is robotic. There's only a couple more of these, so let's just look at them. Here we have Maz the Gunner, and Maz again in jackets. It seems like a lot of jackets going on. Midriff barely showing. Yeah. Seems like this artist does not like legs at all. Seems like nobody is getting their legs covered up. Now, the thing here is you balance this out between Mad Moxie, who is the most extreme example, and the reality of people who would be vault hunters, who would be in dangerous situations all the time and would want to be slightly armored or covered up. Although they have shields, so having like a jacket and such is more an artistic thing than anything else. Here's Zane the Operative. Again, no legs showing. So this might be because there's an emphasis here of more cosmetic skins. Seems like everybody has robotic legs in this game. That very well may be the case here. That there's just an emphasis of more robotic skins and coverage here. What they're not showing here is a Tiny Tina character cosplay guide. They're not doing a Lilith cosplay guide. They're not doing any of the other characters, which frankly the two other characters besides Lilith that are still around from the first game have been pretty much forgotten, and all the characters from the second game have been pretty much forgotten. So let's see, we need a warrior. If we play warrior, I think we'll get to the three. Oh, I did not, I think, do the tavern brawl in the previous one. Let's do a tavern brawl here. Create deck, warrior here. I think I've totally forgotten to do the tavern brawl on the European account. Borderlands 3 might very well be a great example of a game that has a slightly different, visual director, visual artist, and they want to take it in a slightly different way. They've decided to make all the new characters a slightly bit more clothed. Not that they were extremely scantily clad anyways, and that's fine. Definitely no push for any more Mad Moxies. I'm sure that they've felt like there's been far too many Mad Moxie characters out there. There's also not really a push for Mad Moxie's daughter, the big fat gigantic woman character, which the only way you would have been able to cosplay as her is if you were extremely overweight or wearing a fat suit, which I think people would have been upset with. And I doubt too many cosplayers would have wanted to cosplay as an unattractive character in general. Generally speaking, cosplayers are not trying to cosplay as unattractive characters. The end of your turn, deal 2 damage to an enemy hero. Alright, we'll see if this works. But unlike Mortal Kombat 11, as long as Gearbox doesn't make a big deal that they've slightly changed the graphics, I imagine people won't even recognize it. If there is really even anything to recognize, it's questionable. I would have to look up Borderlands 2 screenshots, and I guess we could do that research, but let's look at this article first. Tech Raptor has an article. Be very afraid, Slender the Arrival is coming to Nintendo Switch tomorrow. So this is another example, I think, of an old indie game going to the Nintendo Switch, and like a low quality game really that shouldn't be going to the Switch, but it's being allowed to Switch. I am certainly being a little bit elitist though. In reality, there probably is a great argument to the idea of games becoming.
Are you my master?
Sorry, I'm typing. Games becoming specifically how would I put this? More available around the world.
Break their ranks! It's mine!
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I kind of just I've lost my train of thought again, and I am not wide awake enough.
Here you're hot.
There we go. So I did a little bit of research here. Here's what the characters look like in Borderlands 2, although this seems like this is an early alpha thing. You have characters that have more skin-tight clothing and more arms being shown. But mostly they are in a high fashion clothing with the Lilith's outfit seems to show a little bit less, a lot more cleavage, yeah, and a lot more tattoos, and they're kind of getting away from that. But then other characters are pretty much clothed, so that kind of is just the way it, I think, has always been. Although no, because I did remember Maya in particular compared to Lilith seemed to be more clothed, and all the secondary characters seem to be more clothed. So if anything, I guess this has just been something that's been happening for a while, since Borderlands 1. But it's been a slow transition. Which seems fair enough.
Everyone's biggest fan. Who needs water?
Of course, I'm just rambling here on something that only a percentage of people in video games care about. Like, on the other hand, it very possibly was just the artist's own desire to go in that direction.
Show today, folks. Enjoy.
Break their ranks!
Okay.
It's mine!
Next game we have to consider is Bocce VR. I'm not sure if playing Bocce in real life is fun, let alone playing it in VR. Very few people even know how to play Bocce ball, so you definitely don't throw the ball at people's heads. So this really is an example of a stand in one place and throw things VR game we've seen many times before. It's $1.59 discounted, and English only, says as full audio. I doubt that. I don't see anything here that doesn't make me think this is just a low effort VR game. So Bocce VR is going to get removed. Not put on the fall list. Let's see, rush.
Don't think you might miss it. Amazing! Job's done.
Next game we have to consider is called War Builder League, which is rated positively. This looks like this is a new example of one of those games where you build the vehicle and then fight each other. It's got a little bit of a different polish on it, but frankly, always feels like a game where the developer of the game is making the player make all the content, and so it's kind of contentless without it. It's early access, it's free, it's got a bunch of languages it supports. I have no desire to put this on the follow list though, because this really isn't a game for me. Also, it's online multiplayer only, so as soon as people stop playing this, it's completely useless as a game. There we go.
Amazing! Job's done.
Could have played that differently that turn.
Cthulhu! Cthulhu! Cthulhu!
Next game we have to consider is a game called Res, which looks like a very ugly, low effort, asset flip platforming game, for lack of a better term. This certainly doesn't look good. It looks like they're janky and highlighting the jankiness of it. Yeah. Nothing here of interest. 15% off for $11.04, English and Russian. So this is a low effort Russian game. Not super surprised about that. Alright, so if I play this,
Arena's full.
and then this,
Fear your heart.
and then do this, and in the turn. Next game we have on Steam is called That's Pretty Clever, which looks like a low effort bingo type game, it seems like.
Must consider.
Not really knowing how this game works. It does feel like all you're doing is rolling dice, which that's not particularly interesting to me. $4.99, English and German. Like, yeah, I see nothing here of interest. And you get back to the tabletop simulator issue of why not just play this on tabletop simulator or play this in the real world. Even though it seems moderately complicated, it doesn't seem like it's that complicated that it needs to be in a digital form.
As long as it keeps out.
Next we have an article here from TechRaptor. Catherine Fullbody reveals a richer story. I'm trying to see if these are opinion pieces that they're just trickling out, or if these are just teaser articles. I guess these are mostly just teaser articles right now. Still, I imagine people are trying to recover from E3, so they're not actually reviewing games, which they're gonna have to review games because Bloodstained is out, and I think it is a game that, from what I hear, is amazingly great and the Castlevania game you would want to see. So yeah, if somebody gifted me Bloodstained Ritual of the Night right now, I would potentially just do a live stream of me pre-recording footage for later, which is something I certainly wanted to start doing for brand new games, but I've never been able to really buy a brand new game to get around to doing that. But yeah, that is something in the back if I'm rolling in cash and can afford to buy brand new games instead of waiting till a Steam sale happens, which the summer sale is happening in a few days now. There's something to be said about getting more views with brand new games than getting no views with small time. I'm just going to attack here. But yeah, Bloodstained Ritual Night is out. It's been out for a couple days now. It sounds like it's great. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Sayonara Wild Hearts presents a wild experience. Again, I bet this is just a hype article. The images aren't even loading up. It's taking too long. Can't really blame the RAM on this one. I think that this time it's just TechRaptor's website. Sayonara Wild Heart seems slightly interesting. But I don't know if there's much else I can say about it so far. A lot of games like that. So here's the announcement from Gearbox Publishing. Penn and Teller VR. Frankly unfair, unkind, unnecessary, and underhanded. Available June 27th. They put out 2 trailers. Now I would argue this trailer in particular has a odd choice of color toning in the animated version of Teller here. I mean Penn Jillette. Teller is all pale white guy. This is a pale white guy. That's fair, but they've got Penn Jillette as orange, and he's not orange. He's a pale white guy too. So I don't know what they went with that. Also, these 2 trailers came out. The trailer where they vaccinate a person for against their will while they have the VR headsets on is not one of the ones that's been released yet. And it seems like as a VR collection of tricks, games, magic tricks, things to make fun of your friends who are wearing the headset, doesn't seem like it's much or that interesting. One example is they have you smashing virtual eggs, and then they tell you to place an egg where you know they will smack their hand so that they smash a real egg. So yeah, there's probably, unless this is free, which it isn't because they're pre-ordering it, and on the Oculus Quest, I question the actual value of this product. Hopefully it's only like $10 at most, and not a ridiculously high price of $30 to $60. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. The musical JRPG platform Viola brings a world of whimsy to Steam in July. I've not heard of this game, but I guess that's fair enough considering it's not out. This is something that just looks like a standard platforming game. If the music doesn't add something to this really just looks like it's a JRPG with some music elements. I could see a JRPG game working with a story that's slightly focused around music, but I bet this game isn't going to put much of a spin on it other than that.
Job's done.
So I don't need to actually do anything with that information, however, because it'll just come to Steam when it comes to Steam. Gamatsu has the Famitsu sales for 6/10 through 6/16. We're inconsistent on looking at these things, but now that E3 is done, might make some more sense. So for software sales, Doraemon Season of Stories is new. Smash Bros. Ultimate is in second place. Mario Kart Switch Edition bundled version included. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Pokemon Let's Go, Pikachu, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Splatoon, New Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Party, and Monster Hunter. So 9 out of the top 10 sellers this week was Nintendo Switch products and these and Nintendo first-party products, I believe, too. For the most part, Minecraft Switch Bundle Edition and Doraemon Story of Seasons being the two exceptions there. So, great week for Nintendo. Switch sold the most, double the PlayStation 4, and still about 5,000 more units than the PlayStation 4 and Pro combined. The 2DS and new 2DS LL and new 3DS LL probably not getting much more support, so we'll start seeing them drop down. And a kind of high number of Xbox sales. The fact that they're even in the hundreds for the Xbox One X is kind of amazing. So E3 did have an effect on the Japanese audience to sell Xbox One S's, which would be the cheaper things, and the Xbox One X, which are the most expensive versions. And the Vita is dying, but still holding on with 139 unit sales. And these are individual unit sales, I believe. These aren't in the thousands. So somehow Microsoft's press conference impressed, and I imagine that's because there just wasn't a Sony press conference at all. So E3 really helped Microsoft in Japan, and I wouldn't have really thought that. Or maybe I'm getting information from the wrong speculation. Perhaps there's a completely different reason why Xbox controllers sold well that week. TechRaptor has an article here. Earn your beard in a top-down wizard brawler called Mage Quit, coming this fall. This is another hype article. And with this one graphic, it does not look particularly interesting. Let's see.
Don't blink. You might miss it.
4 damage, 2 damage, -3.
Trust me.
Let's see. We have a game on Steam called Volleyball Fever. This looks like Roblox and volleyball, and it looks like they've just used a soccer ball skin to make volleyball. And I guess this gets around the skimpy clothing issue with volleyball games in a very weird way. This is kind of the perfect example with, if you are trying to make a family-friendly volleyball game, you're basically going to put people in outfits that you would never see people actually wear. This really feels like soccer people playing volleyball with a soccer ball and soccer uniforms. Early access for $5.59, English only. This is a complete garbage asset flip of a game. But interesting nonetheless to kind of prove the conundrum of how do you make a volleyball game that isn't Dead or Alive beach volleyball. I don't think you can. Next game we have to consider is a game called Weird, which looks like a hex grid placement strategy game. Doesn't look very visually polished, doesn't look particularly interesting. Yeah, I don't see anything here. $3.99 English and Russian with full Russian audio. Feels like a low effort Russian game to me.
Fresh from Kazakhstan.
We're looking at pretty much every game today. Next game we have to consider is called Shadows and Lies. It looks like an RPG Maker game. Don't really have to say anything else besides it looks like an RPG Maker game to kind of know it's out. 30% off for $6.99. Seems like maybe they're trying to sell it on some well, no, that's a different game called Fortress of Hell. I'm just saying they're promoting a different game. Yeah, this RPG Maker game doesn't look good, though, so it's leaving. I don't care about another game. Let's see, Rush. Battle Cry.
You might miss it.
A couple random dragons.
Amazing!
My hand is too full.
TechRaptor has an article here. Bandai Namco cancels the Japanese release of Don't Nod's Twin Mirror, which makes me wonder if the game has just been canceled in total. It was announced today that the Japanese release for has officially been canceled by Bandai Namco, who cited that the game will not be coming to Japan for various reasons in a Bandai Japan statement. What are the various reasons? I wonder. Let's see. No official reason has been cited, though some speculate points to the difficulty of Western-made productions making an impact in Japan. Don't Nod has struggled with that itself, with their major hit Life is Strange only selling roughly 11,500 copies, according to Famitsu, despite selling over 3 million copies globally after 2 years. Alright, well, that certainly shows a difference in the audience there. I don't know what's in Twin Mirror to make me guess why it wouldn't sell well, but I imagine the fact that it's heavily inspired by Twin Peaks, and I bet Twin Peaks isn't super popular in Japan. That might be part of it. But there might also be something in this game that is just offensive. Off the top of my head, if there was any physical attacks against children, there was a physical attack in Japan recently. I could see that. If there was any like sexual attacks against children in the game, that might be the part they don't want to come up, since there was a big rape case that happened in Japan. If there's drug use in there, it could be like Judgment. I wouldn't be surprised if drug use would be considered more no-go zone than the two previous things I mentioned.
As long as it keeps out arrows.
But it might very well be that none of that's in Twin Mirror, and it's just people don't relate to it. And it might just be Bandai Namco in total. Like, Bandai Namco is about 50-50 on the quality of their publishing, so I wouldn't be surprised if they screwed up and simply chose to publish a game to not publish a game that actually would sell well. Or maybe they are publishing the game in the West also, so they can just force people to import it from the West if they want to play it in Japan, and not have to spend the money to localize it or translate it into Japanese. Any of those could be the factor, and until the game comes out, we really don't know what it is. Next we have a game on Steam here called Giant Bear Rampage, a kaiju bear simulator, which this feels like this is just a low effort asset flip game. I don't know why I'd want to play as specifically a giant bear.
What now?
Like, I'd much prefer to play as Godzilla. So it seems very strange. $4.49 discounted, English only. I'm wearing out my voice quite a lot. I played this wrong.
It's mine.
So yeah, Giant Bear Rampage not making it to the follow list. TechRaptor has an article, start popping pills when Dr. Mario World releases this July. I hear the pills actually speak, so that might be a slightly different experience. But I don't know, Dr. Mario World, being a simplistic kind of match 3 Tetris style game, might work very well on mobile. So I kind of have a little bit of hope for that game, more than an average game.
We hear your heart.
Deal 1 damage.
Let me show you the other side.
Next we have a game that's just a bunch of Asian characters. That's an RPG Maker game. Doesn't support English. It's 59 cents down, discounted, and it's Chinese only. So yeah, a Chinese only RPG Maker game, not making it to the fall list. Still have a ton of tabs. And I'm still not winning, so let's come back here. Because we've made no progress here. I played warrior cards, but let's just make a hunter deck instead. Delete this and come over and take this and just complete that. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Fishman Avoiding Fishing, which is clearly a extremely low effort game that's not even full screen. This is less than what I'd even call a student project. This is a joke. It's 99 cents Chinese only. So we're still getting the bad, a high level of bad Chinese games. There was a slickdeals.net, which is a conglomeration site of sales. There was a sale, I believe it was a Walmart sale or something, where you could get a force feedback steering wheel and pedals for the PlayStation 3. It was a pretty good deal, but it's still, to get a steering wheel and force feedback pedals and things. I don't know if the pedals are force feedback or just the steering wheel, probably just the steering wheel. You're still paying around $150, even with about $100 off the price of it. That is also certainly a ridiculous accessory that you really have to be pretty rich to get, and you would want to give it to kids that are into race car driving games at arcades and such. There's really no legitimate reason as a YouTuber for me to have one of those, other than my own petty wants and whims, because that's not the experience that most people are going to have. Comparing that to like having an Xbox 360 controller or an Xbox One controller, you're very different there, because most people would have that controller, or it's reasonable to say people should buy that kind of controller, even if they're a PC gamer. Moving on, there's a game here to consider called Star Wheels, which looks like it's a VR racing game that doesn't look particularly interesting. If this requires VR, apparently it doesn't. Does it even support VR? No. Then why does the main character have a VR headset? Well, it's multiplayer only, so this game's not gonna make it to my fall list. It's not visually impressive anyways. I'm just gonna end the turn. A Taiwanese listing came up for Travis Strikes Again No More Heroes Complete Edition. So the DLC for Travis Strikes Again No More Heroes apparently is coming to the PlayStation 4, which that's not super surprising. We are getting to that level now that E3 has happened, where we're going to start seeing more Japanese games, I think, delayed too. So Gamatsu has an article here. The Last Labyrinth is delayed to fall, Japanese
Arena's
TV
full.
spot,
Beat it.
plus an outline of the game's required peripherals, which to play it on PlayStation 4, you need a PlayStation VR and a DualShock 4 or 2 PlayStation Move controllers. To play on the Oculus, you need an Oculus Rift or Rift S with an Oculus Touch controller, or Steam, you need an HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, or Windows Mixed Reality controllers with all the controllers, or the Windows Store with motion controllers. So you need quite a bit. And then this Japanese TV spot is probably not particularly worth looking at because it looks to be pretty much the same as what we've already seen. So you're in this VR game that's VR for no reason, and you're strapped to a chair that rolls around, and this ghost-like character is, you're controlling her and telling her what to do instead of just, I don't know, escaping the chair. Let's see, let's do that. And it seems to me like Last Labyrinth very possibly is going to be a super short experiment in VR by a small-time Japanese developer that really shouldn't have experimented in VR and gave up relatively early. So I doubt the game is very, very good. Speaking of games I doubt that are very good, we have Mission Evil Guy here, which is a low-effort name for what looks like a low-effort running game, for lack of a better term. I don't think you actually jump. I think you just run very fast. $11.99 they want for this game, and I am not impressed by those
As long as
visuals at
it
all.
keeps out in-
So that's leaving. Gametsu has an article. Tokomiki Memorial Girls Side 4 teaser website has been launched. This looks like another visual novel. Visual novels always coming out. I watched a YouTube video talking about the Dot Hack series of games that were mostly PlayStation games, I think. And just how many different bits of media that were created and how flooded and saturated the market is with Dot Hack games. So it's kind of hard to justify anybody getting into Dot Hack when, even by comparison to Sword Art Online, which is a mess of anime series and games, Sword Art Online by far is way better. And this is pretty typical in Japanese media, to have big media pushes and just oversaturate the market to the point where they can't sustain it. And in a weird way, that's the same thing with Game Freak and Pokemon too, is that they oversaturated the number of Pokemon in the National Pokedex to the point where they were too lazy or not funded well enough to animate 800 new characters, which I still think if they just brought in the old animations, that would be fine, or if they set everything ahead a few hundred years, and that explained why so many of the Pokemon weren't there. That too would have been a decent way to go about solving that problem. At a certain point, I think the Pokemon series would benefit for just jumping 100 years in the future, or having some kind of mass extinction happen, or going back into the past 100 years, so that so many Pokemon don't exist. Moving on, Gamma Sutra has an article. EA praises its own, quote, ethical, fun, and enjoyable loot box use in FIFA. FIFA is, by most accounts, including my own general guess, the worst example of loot boxes ever. So this is EA being EA, and EA is always an evil company, always going to be an evil company. Nobody should be surprised about this. This is so ridiculous that they're all these companies are trying to defend loot boxes here when the better response is to say something along the lines of, we've heard your concerns and we're looking into ways to better support the community in a more ethical way. Just pay lip service to it and then change nothing, or not change very little for several years. This loot box bill certainly is not going to get not passed because EA spills a bunch of gibberish and pretends like they're not the #1 perpetrator of loot boxes. I can hit that. I can hit that. I can hit that. And then
There's a customer born every minute.
let's see what we want. That and that.
Time moves quickly.
As long as it keeps out arrows.
Next game we have to consider is called Night of the Scarecrows, which looks like a low effort horror game, massive flip game. Although I'm not sure it really is, and that's the problem. It does suffer from some dark screenshot, but then there's also gameplay here. It looks like you have an actual gun, or at least a flare gun. It does look like you're actually shooting and playing something here. So this early access game is $4.99. It's in English with full audio, it says. This kind of needs to go on the fall list, which is going to suck when I do the next fall list cleanup and look at this game and go, why is this on the fall list? Because by that point, almost certainly, it will be completely obvious that the game itself is not worth owning because of the number of reviews against it. Let's see. I kind of have to do all of this. I just hit this, hit this. Wait on that. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Devs deserve the benefits of a union, says presidential hopeful Bernie Sanders. This is basically the same story being rewritten a second time. I think by the exact same person, too, because I think the previous story was Gamma Sutra also. It is a ridiculous argument to make that you should vote for Bernie Sanders if you want to support the video game industry or anything like that. If you're going to be a one topic voter, which is a bad way to vote, certainly, and video games really shouldn't be your one topic. There's more important things than video games out there, and it's an industry big enough that no actual president of the United States would screw with it. It's bigger than the movie industry, so this is not the days in which Tipper Gore was pushing for censorship, and I think even if Al Gore did run for president right now, he almost certainly would not be excluded from my personal vote just because of maybe a pro-censorship stance that he had in the 80s. So, yeah, you should vote for the economy in general, at the very least, if that's going to be your main focus, not just the video game industry. And yeah, there's definitely an argument, particularly with Bernie Sanders, that how many of the other Democrats would get behind and support a President Sanders when the Democrats basically colluded to make sure he wasn't the president in the previous election to hand it to hand the nomination to Hillary Clinton. Like, maybe the lineup of who is in the Democratic powerhouse has changed significantly since then, but I wouldn't be super surprised if there was a major blue wave and Bernie Sanders became president, that you still would have Bernie Sanders having trouble convincing people to pass bills that he would want to sign. And so that is something to consider, although probably not a good reason to not vote for him either. And I'm talking about politics at this point, which is not what this video game channel is about, so let's move on.
It's mine! Don't blink. You might miss it. I'm everyone's biggest fan!
Moving on, Gamma Sutra has an article. Twitch requires Bebo to bolster its esports offerings. I've never heard of Bebo, but apparently 10 people work there. It was a social network that turned into an esports company.
We hear your heart.
Let's see. Yeah, this seems like Twitch acquired people. It's kind of funny, like, Amazon is laying off people from the Amazon Game Services, but Twitch, which is owned by Amazon, is hiring people. So it seems like it's a almost circular logic. Do you need more people that work for Amazon or less people? Or do you just have the wrong people in the wrong places? And boy, am I having trouble getting victories here. This is annoying. This is really annoying. Another Tavern Brawl day. TechRaptor has an article. Konami releases the Japanese version for the Classic Anniversary Collection. They said they were going to do this. They've done this. I guess that's news. Still, the Castlevania Anniversary Collection really doesn't have the middle tier Castlevania games that people would be most interested in playing. So you're in kind of a weird position because of that alone. Gamma Sutra had this blog, Originality and Choice Design Insights We Learned at DreamHack Dallas 2019. I've never heard of this DreamHack Dallas before, and I'm questioning, when did this happen? Because that would have been good information to report as news if there was a convention of any note happening, particularly around E3.
Quickly.
But this might just be like a really old article too that's just getting retweeted by Gamma Sutra. Yeah, I'm not seeing a day that DreamHack Dallas happened, so I would have to do more research if I actually cared, which I kind of don't. I've not heard of any DreamHack events, so it might specifically be for more security and programmers in general than video game programmer type events, or it might just be a small event in general. Dallas is certainly a big city, but that doesn't inherently mean that all the events they have there are going to be big. I mean, even in Vegas, you can have small-time convention centers rented out for small events.
Job's done.
Moving on, TechRaptor has an article here. Taito Corporation back on the Western console market with a Ninja Warriors reboot, which that'll be interesting if there's any kind of complaint about the TV show called Ninja Warrior and this old Taito game. Let's see. When did they stop making games? See, they made one in 1994, and then they seemingly have done nothing since 1994. 15-year mostly silence, it seems like. I'm gonna hit this. Although that's not big news either. Twitch support had, here we go, we're recovering from the issue preventing cheering and bits from being used. We appreciate the reports. We're looking into reports of cheering bits. Thank you for your patience. Recovering from issues of streaming not being able to connect to our service. Seems like they can't even go a week without there being something wrong with Twitch. Although maybe they're not global terrible problems either, because what I don't see is people reporting that all of Twitch is not working. So these might be isolated incidences. Gamasutra has another obituary. Bluepoint Games vice president and founder Andy O'Neill. He passed away at age 47. This is another thing. This is the problem of flying to other places and getting drunk at other places. Although this person could have easily died without even going to E3, so I have no idea. You never get told what happened. There's no completion or closure in this. Apparently he was tapped by Sony to port and remaster the God of War collection, which, did he do that? Nathan Drake, Shadow of the Colossus. Let's see, there's a link here to Dignity Memorial. What is that? That's like a actual website of an actual funeral home. Almost all the funeral homes in the United States are owned by a parent company. So it looks like they make it so it looks like they're home run funeral services, but they're actually owned by a mega corporation. Well, this memorial site, at the very least, does say more than the news articles, but nothing specifically about how he passed or anything like that. Which I guess is just, maybe I misunderstand A, news reporting on this, and B, just the general concept of reporting in general. So yeah, another person died. TechRaptor has an article. E.g. Anomnuma and other big names receive big promotions at Nintendo. I think we already talked about this. Not really a lot to say there. It's nice for them to get promoted. They probably put in their time and deserve to be promoted many years ago. So that's also something to keep in mind. I don't think being promoted at Nintendo really changes your job by much, though. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't change your daily duties or your pay scale much at all.
It's mine.
Job's done.
We have a game on Steam here called Samurai Showdown 5 Special. It's Showdown without a W. And I think we knew this game was coming out. So this is already positively reviewed. It's $9.99. That's not asking a lot for a fighting game. Full audio in Japanese. This might be a re-release of an older game. Probably is for that part. An old SNK game. But I think this can go to the wish list directly. I don't really even see a reason for it to be on the fall list, so that's probably where it's gonna head. One less for each enemy
Arena's
minion.
full. Beat it.
And 3 damage plus some overkill.
You might miss it.
Let's see. TechRaptor has the same article. Veteran technical engineer and Blue Point Games co-founder Andy O'Neill passes away. Apparently he worked on Metroid Prime 2 and Turok Rage Wars. Let's see. This is... He lived in Austin, Texas. First job was at Acclaim. Blah blah blah. He worked on Metro Prime 2 Echoes and Metro Prime 3. Let's see. I don't know about Blue Point Games. I've never heard of a game that they've developed. Well, apparently they were just doing remasters for Sony.
Time waits.
Yep. And just no real reason why he died. Looks like a healthy enough guy, certainly. To be dying at 47 is... It's weird because you don't get these stories from any of the Japanese developers. Japanese people who are in the video game industry either live really long or they just don't report when people die at all, which may very well be the case. I wouldn't be surprised if it is very much the case that hundreds, if not dozens of people have died.
Good tickets don't come cheap.
Well, dozens of people each year die in Japan as game developers, and they just don't mention any of them.
Job's done.
Moving on, Gamasutra has an article. Niantic has acquired the Beast of Balance developer Sensible Object. I've never heard of this game, Beast of Balance, but if the Pokemon Go creator purchased them, then that's probably Niantic trying to expand its market base and maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, do something different and new instead of just doing the Harry Potter Pokemon Go version. Next game we have to consider on Steam is called Afterburn, which looks like a 3D fly around fighting game. I wouldn't really want to call this an asset flip game, more just an early access game, and that's exactly what it's labeled as, $9.99. Maybe I'll give this a follow out of just a general lack of dogfighting games on Steam, there probably is a better dogfighting style game, and that would make a lot more sense for a 3D fighting game, but this doesn't look like a terrible first start. Meanwhile, I am getting nowhere with this tavern brawl, and if I'm gonna run out of news somehow I'm gonna actually run out of news. Let's just go with the mage. So these pre-built decks are not working for the tavern brawl, at least. Try this. Tech Raptor has an article. Marvel Ultimate Alliance looks like a marvelous return to form. Okay, so I was kind of expecting Ultimate Alliance to be pretty good. Maybe not amazingly great, but I think it also is a Switch exclusive, so I don't think it really matters to me. And frankly, even if it's not a Switch exclusive, I probably am not going to
You asked for it.
play it. Speaking of which, games I'm not going to play, we have Lovely Planet 2, April Skies. If you liked Lovely Planet 1, then this game is for you. For me, I didn't like Lovely Planet 1. It was too much of a speedrun game than what I guess I thought it was going to be, and it was too much of a difficult game than I thought it really was going to be. It's $7.99 discounted, a bunch of languages supported. Play the first game. If you like the first game, then play the second game would be my guess. As for me, I'm not going to put it on the follow list. Next game we have to consider is called Dead Monarchy, which looks like a asset flip game with a lot of videos. There's just a ton of videos here. This looks like this is a tabletop game, and it's tagged with nudity, which is odd. Yeah, this really just seems like it is just a tabletop game of some sort, but not anything that interests me. I'm trying to squeeze through all of this.
Time runs out on me.
Yeah, Dead Monarchy is early access, 10% off for $8.99, English only. I don't think that needs to be on the follow list. Let's see.
Don't blink. You might miss it.
This is taking forever. Tech Raptor, Romero Games Empire of Sin looks delightfully indulgent. This, I believe, is the mob game where you control one of several mobs that you're doing kind of a strategy game for it. So it's another one of those hard particles post E3. This game does sound interesting and look visually interesting. So when it comes out, I'll put it on the fall list, certainly, but I don't know if I really need to talk about it right now. Play that.
Everyone's biggest fan.
So
Hey, too slow.
hit that. See, next game we have to consider is called Citizens of Space from Sega. Weird that Sega would put out a game just in the middle of E3.
Is that food?
They didn't talk about this game as far as I could tell during E3. I don't even know where Sega really would have presented its games. Yeah, looks like this is an RPG game of some interest. So I'll put this on the follow list, but it's $14.99. Supposedly full audio in the English. I'll put this on the follow list. I wouldn't be surprised if actually all my tabs are things from last week, actually. I just lost a coin. But that shouldn't be too big a deal. Follow up or restatement here of Gamma Sutra. Twitch sues unknown parties after a flood of explicit videos on their Artifact streams. We had already talked about that. We have a game on Steam here called ZIC Survival, which looks like a Roblox asset flip game. Looks like total garbage. $3.24 discounted English and Russian. Still just trying to burn through all this news. And then once the news is done, I'm gonna just play off screen. Because this is certainly one of those frustrating days for Hearthstone where it's just victories are not coming. Gimatsu has an article, the Ninja Warriors once again coming west, which we had already talked about, but slightly different screenshot. I don't know how good or interesting or relevant the Ninja Warriors as a series is.
As long as it keeps out arrows.
Next we have a game on Steam called The Incredible Adventures of Super Panda. This looks a little too saccharine sweet for what the gameplay looks like with these buzzsaws and such. And it looks like this is probably a terribly made Super Meat Boy-esque platformer where you're just playing as a panda because of it being an asset flip game. This really feels like a game that a little kid might buy and then find out is incredibly difficult. They want $10.79 discounted for this English-only game. I am unimpressed by the screenshots and the gameplay video, so that's not going to make it to the follow list. Rush.
We hear your heart.
We'll hit that. Hit that.
It's
That.
break
Play
their
that.
ranks. Arena's full. Beat it.
This might be new information, or this might just be repeated information. In this case, Senran Kagura Peach Ball for the Switch launches July 9th in Europe. The new information would be if this is the new Europe release announcement, day and date with the North American release. Senran Kagura Peach Ball is a pinball game with the Senran Kagura ninja anime girls in bikinis on the tables. I wouldn't dare click this play button for possible YouTube family unfriendliness, but the game itself is a Peggy 16 game, so it's not really going too extreme with anything. Yeah, the general idea of all the Senran Kagura games are that it is built around cheesecake and blue imagery to make decent games. I wouldn't really call Senran Kagura games likely the best games to ever exist or anything like that in the genre, but they make decent games, and then they sell on their two selling points of a decently fun to play game with anime ninja girls in outfits. And particularly for Peach Ball, it seems like all the characters are in animal costume bikini outfits instead of their standard clothing, which I don't get the reason for that, but whatever. Let's see. 4 damage to a minion. Let's just kill that. And let's kill that. That. Tech Raptor has an article here. Don't hold your breath for Final Fantasy XIV Classic, says producer. So I guess the idea is Final Fantasy XIV is the online game. So World of Warcraft Classic has been sort of released out there. But yeah, I wouldn't expect that. I don't think Final Fantasy XIV is big enough for that to be a thing. And basically you're asking for a lot more than what you could actually get. Next hero power this turn does 2 more damage. So that won't work. So it's in this turn. Yeah, I'm not sure that it's really necessary to cover Final Fantasy XIV at all. Next game we have on Steam is called Beyond a Total Loss, which looks like an MS Paint graphics game. Looks just like total garbage.
And you taught
$8.99 discounted. English only. Yeah, it does not really need any more consideration than that. I think I see the end of the tunnel, but since my well, mostly because my computer reset, I'm in a weird position because of that. Okay, let's do this. This. And I'm just gonna play this.
Welcome to the show.
And that's not gonna let me use it twice, which I'm not surprised.
Aw, thank you.
I lost. Lost again. Gematsu has an article. The Alliance Alive HD remaster for PS4 and Switch launches October 10th in Japan. I don't know what the Alliance Alive is, though. Is it a visual novel? What kind of game is this? I cannot get an idea. It says explore numerous themed realms, unique ships, animal mounts, and flying machines. I guess it's an RPG, but I don't even recognize it. Probably have talked about it before. Alright. Speaking of visual novels, we have The Logic of the Miniature Garden here as a visual novel. It's not tagged as having any sexual content or nudity. Although some games have been tagged sexual content and nudity and released since the whole manga gamer accusation, which really is all I can call it. This is $5.99. It's rated positive now. This kind of has to go on the follow list to see if this actually is a good visual novel worth covering. I don't think I really want to play any more Hearthstone, frankly. And that's just being honest here. I still need to play warrior cards, and that's really the thing I need to do, but I also need to get the Tavern Brawl done. I guess now that Tavern Brawls don't really end, we could leave them. They no longer end in 3 days, they end in 5 days. I could leave them till Friday if I wanted to, but then I'd probably forget them. So it's better to play them off screen, get the pack, and open the pack on Fridays. That way we have a guaranteed thing. But I am just kind of burned out. And yeah, I'm also wasting a lot of time doing this Lego set. The Parisian restaurant is what I'm building, and it's an old creator expert set with 2,500, like over 2,000 pieces, like 2,400 pieces, and it's a lot of building. It's taken me like an entire weekend plus till Wednesday to try and finish it, and I'm still not done. Next game to consider here is a bunch of Asian characters and 10 Desires. This was a bullet hell shoot 'em up game. I don't think, even if this is a Toho collection style bullet hell game, I wouldn't want to play it because it's a bullet hell game. $14.99, English not supported, Japanese only. Let's see. Next game we have to consider is called Double Dealing Character, and it looks like the exact same Toho characters in a bullet hell shooter game. So perhaps this developer is just putting out older games that says it came out in 2013. $14.99, Japanese only. You probably could play these games without being able to read Japanese pretty easily, though. It can't be that difficult to figure out. But since it's not English supported, it's not something I would cover. Gamatsu has an article here. Kamiko launches June 26th for PC worldwide, June 27th for PS4 Japan. A retro-style action RPG. And all they have is this one screenshot, so that doesn't look particularly interesting to me. And I guess that's just a release date announcement. Gamatsu has an article here. Dragon Quest Your Story, second trailer, poster, visual. So, yeah. I think Dragon Quest Your Story is probably a mobile game that's coming out. No, it's a movie. Oh. It's a movie of the Dragon Quest video game series, which goes to show how popular Dragon Quest is in Japan. Let's see. Next, Gamatsu has an article here. Otome, or Young Maiden visual novel, Gunka o Haisha. Nico is coming to the PS Vita September 12th in Japan, so we're still getting Vita games getting released. I think we'll be seeing that for at least a year or two. Gamatsu has an article. Monster Hunter Frontier Z is going to end service on December 18th in Japan. So this was some kind of online service game for an older Monster Hunter MMO. Which is probably a good thing, because if they would just focus on Monster Hunter World, that probably would be the best way to do this. TechRaptor has an interesting article here. Ubisoft faces backlash in China for allegedly political Watchdog Legion ad. Let's see. The backlash comes from an advertisement for the upcoming Watchdog Legion ad that may be interpreted as support of the recent Hong Kong protesters. So China is pissed because an ad might be interpreted as support of the Hong Kong protesters who don't want to be extradited to China mainland and disappeared. Let's see. Similar to the Umbrella movement, like, you could get into the real detail here. Question is, what is the ad that people are upset with? Let's see. Like, it seems like they omitted the name London in the Chinese version and hashtag London in the Chinese version, but this image, I can't even tell what that is. What does it say? This is one of these reset error things. So this really is a non-controversy, and Ubisoft really would not try to do anything political. I would much more appreciate if Ubisoft said, screw China, we'll just not launch our game in China. Because let's face it, Watch Dogs probably not getting approved in China anyway, so them kowtowing to China in general is just in the hope that they'll be allowed to publish their other games. And frankly, this is the kind of influence that China has been trying to gain and have, where you have to consider China's feelings about every game and every statement you make, even when the game has nothing to do with China or the Hong Kong protests or anything like that. Sounds really ridiculous to me. But of course Ubisoft is just going to kowtow it because they want money, and that's exactly what the Chinese government is trying to accomplish, is convincing corporations to basically publish pro-China propaganda for them. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article. Dragon Star Varner for PC launches in September. This looks like another JRPG game. Yeah, looks slightly interesting. It's getting, I guess, a narrower release window, so they probably said it was coming out in a certain year in 2019. Now they've got it down to September, and then they'll put out a third announcement when they have an actual release date. It's ridiculous. But whatever. I guess the Japanese games, more than anybody, needs as much coverage as possible. Next game we have to consider is the Zusi 3 Aerosoft Edition, which looks like a train simulator clone. I don't see anything visually interesting or special about this. This is $69.99. That seems extremely expensive, although Train Simulator with all its DLC is way more expensive. That's of course not going to make it to the fall list. Next we have a game on Steam called Stupid Dungeon, or I don't know what it's called actually. It's a bunch of Asian names. It says Stupid Dungeon here, and it looks like absolute garbage. English not supported, free to play. What language? Chinese. Surprise on that. And I guess it's important to say, yeah, these low-effort garbage Chinese games probably have nothing to do with the government of China's efforts, or very little to do with the government of China's efforts to have pro-Chinese propaganda in AAA games. It's just kind of two big organizations or two big groups, loosely affiliated groups. Next game we have to consider is bunch of Asian characters, Things As They Are, which looks like a Stardew Valley clone RPG Maker style game. Maybe a little bit Pokemon-esque too. It seems like there's a Pokedex in it. English is not supported. $4.97 discounted, in Chinese again. So yeah, we're still getting these cheap Chinese games. I'm a little surprised I haven't run into an adult game yet. Next game we have to consider is Horror Villa Maze Escape, which looks like it's a VR game where you're kind of in an escape room, but the entirety of this screen video is just in blackness. Seems like you're kind of stuck in an elevator. Requires VR, 99 cents. Yeah, it's not visually attractive, so of course it's not going to the fall list. I have about 4 more tabs, so we'll be done pretty soon here. We're back to a game that actually looks like a video game, at least. This game, Littlewood, it's an RPG. Doesn't look like RPG Maker though, which might be a saving grace. It's already positive. It might be a Stardew Valley game still. So I would want to do some more research on this later. It's early access, $14.99, English only. I'm gonna put this on the follow list, but there's a decent chance that it's more like Stardew Valley than I'd really like it to be, and not enough like Zelda. In fact, yeah, I can pretty much tell that this is a farming game and not a Zelda game, so I'm not even gonna bother to put this on the follow list because, yeah, I don't want to play Stardew Valley clones. I didn't like Stardew Valley. And that's more a personal thing than a recommendation to other people. If you love Stardew Valley, Lilywood might be a good choice for you. Komatsu has an article, Ninja Jaja Maru-kun collection rated for the PS4, Xbox, and Switch in Taiwan, and Cyvaria Delta rated for the Xbox One. These sound like really old Famicom games. Yeah, I've never heard of any of these. They might be labeled something different though. If this is like Mask of the Ninja or something, I don't know if it really is Mask of the Ninja or something, but yeah, we may hear of a Western titled name of this later on. And that brings me to the Humble Bundle. So let's look at the new bundles. I believe we finally have a new game bundle, which very possibly is the evidence needed to say that we are out of the E3 event. Actually, there is no game bundle. It must be the Humble Monthly bundle, which doesn't seem like it has anything I'm super interested in. Or it seems like the system is different. So that's weird. I thought there was a new bundle. Alright, well, let's go back to Twitter and see if there's any new news. Otherwise, I want to wrap up here and just do a bunch of stuff off screen because this is frustrating me to the max. So I'm scrolling now on my Twitter thing. Spike Chunsoft to announce 3 new title localizations on July 4th. 2 of them from Mages, 1 of them from Spike Chunsoft. No real news in that. Astral Chain Action Overview trailer has been released. No real news in that. Japanese box art for the Vanquish Cold Soul game. Is no interest in that. Let's see. Apparently OBS can now display the top Patreon supporters in the About dialog. I think this is the top Patreon supporters to OBS software, though not something that you could integrate into your own Patreon page. Which for me, nobody's supported my Patreon page, so even somebody giving $1 a month would be the top Patreon supporter. And that would be very much appreciated, quite frankly. Be more than I'm getting from YouTube, which is exactly 0. Insomniac Games is hiding a lead material artist. We can talk about that next time. YouTube creators put out a tweet. Attention LGBTQ creators, we want your help to grow your channel. Apply to get all sorts of training plus $2,000 in production equipment at #YouTube. Next up deadline is July 7th. This is the definition of discrimination, quite frankly. They are discriminating against anyone who is not LGBTQ by giving a reward to people just because they are LGBTQ. So sometimes it's described as reverse discrimination, but it's just discrimination on both sides, either side of the story. Yeah, and there's no other news. So, yeah, not exactly how I wanted today to go, but we've been going the average length and didn't get the daily quest done. I did get a Tavern Brawl on the Asian account. Don't think I got a Tavern Brawl on the European account. I have a watch and learn I need to get. It's such a mess. But this is where I'm going to end the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos because that helps me with YouTube. If you want a friend to follow me on any other social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me by Patreon, there's a link down below. Or you could friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list. The Steam Summer Sale is coming. That'd be a great time to do that. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.